You're listening to the Friends Talking Nerdy Podcast Network.
Friends Talking Nerdy. If your friends are nerdy and you are nerdy too, I want to talk to you. Friends Talking Nerdy.
Believe it or not, we still have a show here, folks. Hi, this is Tim the Nerd, bringing another episode of Friends Talking Nerdy to you, folks. Thank you all for joining us. Love Month continues, and Love Month is as long as we damn well want it to be, because the Reverend Tracy and I have a lot of interesting things to say about this particular topic. And speaking of the clergy, here is Her Holiness, the Reverend Tracy.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I've been quite busy, as some might imagine, because, the baby Reverend, for those folks tracking it at home, I'm about a month away from having a little human in my life, and that also, already inherently comes with, some tasks and things you gotta do. And as you guys have also caught on, I'm a big checklist person. So, of course, I have the list in front of me going down it to maintain some sanity and to not completely be overridden by anxiety over it. And then on top of that, I do believe we did mention that the Mr. Reverend and I are working on relocating to New Hampshire for his job. Mm-hmm. That's right, we did, because that's where I was talking about that Discord channel where I accidentally made some brief fans. Hope you guys are listening. Looking forward to voting in November. No, we actually went and spent some time there because his first 2 weeks at his job, they wanted him there more. And fortunately, since he had traveled so much for his prior job, he had some free nights and some benefits and stuff we were able to cash in and have some hotel stays. So I worked out of a hotel room so that he could kind of go to work and stuff. So I was in New Hampshire for 2 weeks. And despite the weird air and mood that I got from said Discord channel, I was fine and got along with everybody. So yeah. I'm not so lefty and anti-gun that I couldn't survive making friends in New Hampshire, I guess. Sorry, I think I'm going to laugh about the anti-gun comment for a little while now, but...
Yeah, that was a little on the ridiculous side.
That was an obviously you didn't actually listen to the episode thing. It goes into... I know we've talked so many times about how we want to discuss anchor bias, but honestly... Primo example there. They didn't like that I said something. They decided they weren't going to like me, so they went and cherry-picked stuff that I feel was obviously not true. You guys are free to correct me if you think I came off like anti-gun in our gun episode. And then went with it. That is actually... Thank you. Thank you for accidentally being a really great test environment for me still trying to understand anchor bias, because that's something I've been playing with. I think I've mentioned it on the show, that's why I try to go with the Reverend page and comment on some of the more controversial things on public Facebooks instead of using my personal one. But yeah, super funny, but it's beautiful there. Wound up snowing quite a bit, so there's even a day that the Mr. Reverend and I were both trapped in the hotel working together, and that went fine too. So, yeah, it's going well. Just a lot of stuff going on. And then, of course, it's getting little things like a car seat and all the stuff that you absolutely have to have by day one of this child being actually in the world. But,
yeah.
I at least should still be around for a while. I mean, I guess common sense might lean that I might take a break of, once the baby's born. But I'm hoping this will be the last of my hiatus until that happens.
Yeah, I mean, I would figure I would need a few days off, too, if I had to pass something the size of a watermelon out of my crotch, so,
A watermelon the size of a lemon. I'm like, yeah, I'm tired of hearing that already. It's okay. I'm gonna get an epidural, folks.
Yeah.
I'm a big naturopath, but I also really respect some of Western medicine and what it does. And there are some good medical reasons to use the things they have, and I plan on doing that. I'm just gonna shut that shit down from the waist down, just
numb it all.
Just give me the pain meds. Nah, but it's actually I love the team and the facility that I'm working with. Looking into that has brought a lot of comfort. They have a hydrotherapy thing. And I guess one of my friends who did have a baby, they had access to one of those, oh yeah, when you're in that tub, because I don't know why it is, but you don't really feel that much pain. I'm like, excellent. That's great. That we're just going to stick with all that shit. And they're going to hook me up on a bunch of monitors, and then, they'll let me know when it's time to get out of the tub. That's where I'm at with it so far.
I remember my high school psychology teacher used to love messing with people, and one thing he did is he started off class one day by stating, pain experienced during pregnancy is psychosomatic. And he went on to argue that the reason that women feel that pain is that they're told they're going to feel it. Now, he ultimately said that, he was being mostly on the facetious side, but there is a little something to what he had to say because, I will never be in your spot, so I can't imagine the amount of, pain stories that other, female body people have told you about going through their pregnancy and how that could, put you on a little bit of nerves.
Oh, yeah. Well, there is actually like a lot of psychology and psychosomatic symptoms you can experience with pain. It can be a lot in your head and a lot with concern. Please don't hear that as all. I don't want to get any comments that I'm anti-woman now, too. But this is actually because of like one of the books I'm reading is Expecting Better. I really like her. She's very much on my mindset. Like she's the don't just tell me what to do. I want to know why. I want studies. I want numbers. And it's funny because, like, one thing that talking about, like, the pain and stuff is, like, yeah, but you need to understand that this is different than, like, you broke your arm pain. This is actually a pain that your body is designed to go through. So if you get into your head of how bad it's going to hurt, it is probably going to be a worse experience for you. And if you're not doing things like looking up, like, how to breathe through it, which was actually something I learned in Taekwondo, was how to breathe through, like, if you did sustain, like, a break or something, because panicking can make the pain worse, can, delay your ability to do anything about it, which can then make the overall injury worse.
Right.
So it's funny, it's like I'm just kind of taking stuff from everywhere. There's also a lot of doulas that have just like posted videos online. I'm like, okay, good. At least the stunt brain is helping me prepare for this.
Nice.
So, yeah, like just to go ahead and give you some credit there that from what I understand, you are correct in that statement that I'm sure there is a decent percentage of that pain that might be caused psychosomatically because you're told it's the most painful thing. But I did love having the doctors kind of reassure. It's like, okay, yes, is it comfortable? No. But we have medicines that kind of help with that, which can keep your blood pressure low, which is one of those medical reasons for anybody out there listening. It's like, I'm going to do it natural because of da-da-da. Well, there are actually some reasons that you do get the pain meds, and it is to help keep your blood pressure at a certain point, etc. Like, there's some perks. But, it's like not only do we have medicine, but also not going into it expecting it to be the most painful experience can help reduce how much pain your brain perceives. So, anywho, fun random pregnancy facts for people out there. Like...
Well, and, being that you touched upon that, I mean, we might as well just talk about it here. I mean, we talked about it, off air, but this is our show. And, with the baby Reverend on the way, as a parent myself, and having gone through, younger children, I realize that, schedules being what they are, there may be times to where you're going to have to say, I can't record this week or for an extended period, but this is and always will be our show.
Oh, yeah.
And the Reverend Tracy, if you can't be involved, whether it's short-term, long-term, or whatever, we'll still find ways to be involved because there's more to putting on a podcast and just flipping on the microphone and talking. There's producing,
exactly.
There's promotion. There's a lot that you would still be able to do if you would not be able to be here on a weekly basis. So that much I want to put out there, people, that the Reverend Tracy's going nowhere.
We've talked about even like say if our schedules never work to record together, there was the idea of doing a spin-off at one point. Of doing something that's a little bit more mental health focused or whatever, since that's kind of my bag. Like, I don't know, we'll see what it looks like. And then as far as like just talking about stuff that goes on in our life, that is feedback that we got from our handful of listeners. So we're going to keep doing that. And I am all for busting this whole like, well, that's only for women to hear. And that's only for men to hear. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm calling bullshit on it. It's human anatomy. And it's okay for us to understand it about each other. right? Like, we can be adults here. Like, I also kind of had some questions about, like, why they didn't teach stuff back in sex ed, quote-unquote sex ed, granted, from Texas sex ed, like, back when I was a kid. And then, like, you know, it turns out, like, then, like, these boys grew up to have gross misunderstandings on, like, the female reproductive system.
Yeah.
So, like, some of my favorites were, I realized, like, oh, yeah, that was a generation. I remember some clickbait at some point was, like, you know, because, like, Bored Panda and places like that, where it's, like, examples of all the same theme.
Yeah.
And it was, like, when male management really express that they don't understand how, like, menstrual cycles work and stuff like that. There was this one woman that had posted a conversation between herself and her boss about how, like, you know, he had said something like, you're going to the bathroom a lot or something. And she had expressed, like, well, I mean, not to get too much detail, but I'm on my period right now. And he literally looked at her and said, well, you can just control that, right? Like, you could just, like, make it not happen as much during the day. And it's like, oh, God, people actually think that? And I looked into it and I was like, oh, God, people actually think that. Like,
wow.
So that's where it is applicable to understand these things. But yeah, so just kind of, you know, putting it out there that we talk about what we talk about because it's relevant to life, just like with our mental health stuff when it comes up.
And it's scary, too. I mean, it falls... I mean, we've talked about it before. I mean, you have parents that don't want schools to teach sex ed, but they're too scared to teach sex ed to their kids.
Yes, because we've gone and tabooed it. So...
Yeah, and then you get, you know, a lot of times guys learning all their sex ed knowledge from pornography.
Yeah, which is not based on reality. And then what's been really interesting, just, you know... Because I don't even know if our topic's going to be a long one anyway, so I feel like we can kind of go on a little tangent this morning as we record.
Yeah.
And I'm getting my coffee in me. Is I've learned, like, since being pregnant, that there actually is, like, an odd amount of stigma and a little bit of hate towards pregnant people sometimes. Like, I've made some pregnancy privilege jokes, but I don't ask for anything that I don't feel like is a need. And that's, like, kind of my core personality anyway. I don't like to feel like I'm a trouble to anybody. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, like, it's kind of interesting how much I've noticed, because I've mentioned, like, the Am I the Asshole blogs that God puts up sometimes. And, yeah, like, there's a little bit of, like, where you read stuff about, like, pregnancy is a very common topic that comes up. Weddings are a very common topic because it's like you got your bridezillas and your pregnant women, which I'm like, why do I feel like this is, like, a little bit sexist on some of these topics that keep coming up? But, yeah, like, some people are really hateful towards pregnant women. And, like, you know, the need to sit is, I guess, viewed as being lazy or something. I'm like, no, you've got, like, a lot of poundage on you, and it can be uncomfortable on your joints. Like, granted, you take that or leave, like, you got to make your choices as best as you can whenever you're dealing with that going on with your body. But, like, can we go back to giving some benefit of the doubt and stop treating pregnant women like they're, quote-unquote, the problem for some reason? Like,
it reminds me of this, like, somebody described something in a particular way that I thought was beautiful that I will say now. I mean, there may be anecdotal stories about women that, quote-unquote, take advantage of their pregnancy to, you know, have everybody, you know, serve them hand and foot, but the analytical data shows something altogether different. Yeah. Women, if they're pregnant, they're going to need that extra help, at times.
Oh, yeah. Like, I can't pick up things. Like, we had the stroller and stuff delivered yesterday. I'm a very fiercely independent person. I've told the Mr. Reverend, please stop me. Because he gets on to me about getting on a chair and, like, getting up high to get stuff in the kitchen. Like, but I'll still do it because I feel like I am able to and it's fine. But, like, I didn't ask for any help when it came to bringing in the stroller. Like, I didn't go out and try to catch the UPS driver and be like, excuse me, sir, I'm pregnant. Can you help me with this?
I'm with child.
I am with child. And literally, I haven't experienced many people do that. There's the occasional pregnant Karen that ends up on TikTok, and that is not the majority.
Anecdotal,
right?
Compared to the analytical.
Yes, it's the loud few getting the attention. So just throwing it out there, I don't personally think pregnant women are the plague of society that's, I guess some people kind of treat them as sometimes. It was really funny. Like, some of the stuff that I've read on Am I the Asshole was just, like, a little bit out there. I was like, really? Like...
Well, because a lot of times the people that are complaining about that are just complaining of the fact that they have extra work to do. Like, if you are the father in this situation, like, the Mr. Reverend, I'm sure, is probably doing some more things around the house that he wouldn't normally do.
If I let him.
But you get my point. You get my point, though. But that's part of the whole process.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
He has talked me into, like, at least letting him carry the laundry up and down the stairs.
Yeah.
Like, I was horrible. Like, no, I can drag it. He goes, baby. Just let me do things. It's okay. Like,
it's just what I'm saying, though, is that a lot of this is probably from some guys that don't like those extra responsibilities that come along with having a pregnant partner. That are bitching and moaning, that are just, women doing their thing during pregnancy and not being a Karen.
Well, I guess, like, to be the example, just for the example on this, what's funny is it wasn't even, like, the male, like, the father in the situation. It was basically this, this woman actually asked if she was the asshole because she wanted to go get ice cream, and it was like at a mall or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's her favorite place or whatever, and she's very much pregnant, and she sat in one of those massage chairs, and because there was nowhere to sit, all the tables were taken, stuff like that. She just wanted to sit and enjoy her ice cream. And I guess this young couple came up, because you also have, like, a lot of young folks that are kind of anti-baby. I've even heard the term in the past of people referring to people who have kids as, like, breeders, like it's some kind of negative thing to decide to have a child.
Yeah.
And they, like, kind of tried to demand that she get up. And it was funny because the Reverend saith that this is a situation where two assholes met in the wild, because I didn't necessarily agree with the pregnant woman's decision either. But I did kind of have some funny back and forth of, like, I would have put in a quarter and just started enjoying a massage with my ice cream. Right. But I guess, like, they went to go get mall security to try to make her get out of the seat. And I'm like, all right, so there's, like, some benefit of the doubt that couple could have totally given this pregnant woman to just let her finish her ice cream, and then they could come back to the chairs.
And is it that important to get security? Seriously?
Right, like, that was my thing. It was like, I can understand being perturbed. I don't understand going full Karen and being like, make her move. But then again, I also don't understand, as a pregnant human, that I do have some discomfort standing for all. So I understand it. Of this, the decision to go into a mall when you know you kind of can't stand up for a long time, and you know you can't guarantee seating for yourself. Like, I don't know, to me, like I said, I probably, if I wanted to be an ass about it, not an asshole, just an ass, I would have, like, enjoyed a massage with my ice cream and said, there, I'm using it. Like, if I really couldn't get up. But if I could get up, just go lean on a wall or take it to my car. Like, because, yeah, like, no offense, society shouldn't bend around me. And if I'm not using the thing as for its intended purpose, I do kind of understand that little bit of a view of you should get up. But yeah, like, it's kind of funny because a lot of them seem to be like the younger couples, people who feel at this point in their life that they might never have children.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's a little bit of that, yeah, they feel kind of justified in judgment. And I'm like, but you're not them.
And that's the thing. I mean, like, it's not like the woman was going to be there for, like, the entire time the mall was open. And any mall that I've been to that has had a massage chair has had more than one.
Oh, they wanted the two next to each other. So, and that even also, like, I didn't ask it because, of course, I had gotten some people who were on the pregnant woman's side, like, really pissed at me. Mm-hmm. It's like, I think you guys missed the part where I said they were both assholes. Like, both groups, this is two assholes met in a wild. And what happened. Yeah. Because I really wanted to ask, like, wait, but there were multiple chairs, and they wanted to do them next to each other. Could she have not moved to another one and let them have the two next to each other? But it did at least turn into some funny back and forth with some folks, too, because I was talking about, like, I would enjoy my ice cream with a massage. Like, you'd have a shake. I was like, oh, and I would let it get all over me while smugly looking at them while eating my ice cream with all the ultimate victory.
Like, it tastes so good and yummy and sweet.
It's like, it's okay. I'm going to have a baby soon. I'm going to have, like, food and stuff all over my shirts and things before I know it. May as well start now with this milkshake all over my body.
Vomit, pee, poop.
See, I was being pleasant about it. I was just going with food. But, my child's going to be perfect and never soil himself.
Yeah. Anyway. Good luck with that one.
It's okay. I'm prepared. I'm prepared for it. It's good.
Yeah. Anyway, I've had an interesting couple of weeks, let's put it that way. On the positive side, I have finally decided to go all bald.
Yes.
Per your suggestion, I invested in a pretty decent skull shaver, which also came with a couple of additions that I didn't anticipate, but were amazing as well, like a nose hair trimmer. I got I'm like an old man at this point. Yeah, Also a beard trimmer as well. I mean, because like the big thing about, growing out the mustache, the reason I would usually grow it out and then shave it after a couple of months is that it would grow too long and start getting hairs in your mouth or whatever. But beard trimmer, just put the little addition on and
nice.
Still there. It's something I've thought about doing for a while now because I've it's one thing to have like the Caesar haircut where it's just a little bit past a buzz cut where there's some hair, but but I for me it would always get to a point where I'd let it grow out to where my sideburns look like I was like a bass player from a 70s country band.
I mean, I wasn't gonna say anything, but yeah.
I've said it plenty of times. It was pretty bad, folks. I mean, if I had like a cowboy hat, darn tootin', I could have done that. But I ended up shaving that, so that was a good choice for me, and I think something that I'm going to keep going forward long term. And the great thing about this too is that the blades came with 2 replacement blades, but the blades last for a year.
Nice.
So I got essentially 3 years usage out of this thing.
And there's something to be said about the self-care element of it too. Like, it's important. Mm-hmm. It is important to do like the grooming habits and stuff, right? Like, not only is it like a sign that something could be wrong if you're not doing it, also, the act of doing it is helpful mentally. So if you can like almost fake it till you make it, kind of goes back to like one of those signs of depression can be like not showering, right? And so it's one of those things that our culture, our society will judge. It's like, oh, that person stinks. I was like, but did you not realize that that's actually like a sign? It's a symptom that something is wrong. And so, I mean, and I speak from experience. I've been in those funks where I don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
And some of breaking that cycle was literally going, I have to, and then doing it. And then once I set the routine, it's amazing how it can help get you out of a funk too. So any of those practices you can do yourself, highly support investing in those things, right? Like from cooking to cleaning to, stuff like that. Those are the things. That's why it's like I own a dozen fucking kitchen gadgets because one of my mental health practices is making good food.
Yeah, I'm officially in my Rob Halford period. He's the lead singer of Judas Priest, and he's like bald now with the, Van Dyke like mine. So it's just, I'm a lot less metal than Rob Halford. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and he probably pays somebody to shave his head for him.
Yeah, probably.
Just saying, different income brackets.
And unless you folks at home start supporting our Patreon, I will never get to that.
I almost want to play like some like song and be like, so for those that care about the Tim the Nerds in the world,
Sarah McLachlan, folks,
you can donate to our Venmo, or not our Venmo, our Patreon, and support the mental health habits of Tim the Nerd.
There you go. There.
In the arms of the angels. Sorry,
Yeah.
like I mentioned, I haven't had my coffee yet, and I didn't sleep well last night, so I'm sorry, folks.
That was a good one. But also, February 27th was the 20th anniversary of the passing of Mr. Rogers.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Rogers. I actually plan on raising the baby Reverend with some Mr. Rogers in the background. So
Yes, you have my Apple TV login information, so
Yes.
you have plenty of Mr. Rogers fun there. There is also a decent podcast called Finding Fred. It was a short-term podcast kind of detailing his life, but in a unique way in terms of, in talking about how his work influenced other people.
Yep.
And stuff like that. Really, really well done. And I made the mistake of listening to it at work, and I say mistake because like throughout I'm like happy tears, and I'm trying to trying to prevent the tears from showing anytime a coworker comes by, so they're not like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah.
But February 28th was another anniversary. That was the 20th anniversary of what would have been my wedding.
Yeah, I had some of those go because I also my starter marriage was in early February, so it was really funny to see like the cake video that my brother had like shared at some point. I'm like, thanks Facebook for reminding me of that failed marriage attempt. Yeah.
I mean, lucky me, I deleted most of my Facebook stuff, so I don't get many reminders anymore.
I mean, I guess I get that. So here's my pitch for it, though, is I don't like how much of my memory has been altered. I've mentioned multiple times on the show, while I haven't been officially diagnosed with it, I have a diagnosis of PTSD, but with CPTSD being so, complex, it's complex PTSD, basically, is what it is. And it's from basically because I had stuff starting early. And something that can happen is it can really fuck with your ability for like timelines and memory and things like that. So what's odd is I refuse to delete any of that stuff because it helps me maintain the timeline that I used to lose. So, granted, sometimes it sucks, like, kind of on the conversation. This is sort of topical, right? Because relationships that failed. Some of my favorites are, like, when I see, like, the photo shoot that I did with the ex that I had to file the restraining order against. And I remember, like, oh, yeah, he made me cry on the way to that photo shoot. Like, but in an odd way, I'm glad that it's there because I don't want to forget. Like, not to stew in it.
Yeah.
But just like that's right, that happened.
Yeah, and that's good for your situation. With my situation,
everybody's different.
Yeah, everybody is definitely different. Yeah, like it's not like I didn't have good things happen during my marriage. I mean, you don't stay married for 14 years and have it all be bad. But there was enough that makes me want to not remember that person exists. Yeah. Rightfully so. If I told you some of the circumstances, but that does not mean I was a perfect angel throughout the marriage. I gave just as much as I took, sadly to say, but that also in a way I think helped make me a better person going forward too, in terms of not ever wanting to repeat something that destructive again.
Right. And it's like, I almost wish Facebook was as smart as like Google Photos, because you can at least tell Google Photos like, hey, maybe I don't need a spotlight of like these things, right?
Yeah.
I had thought about actually taking a break of getting any spotlights for Beans for a while. Because, I almost did it, and then when I went down to it, I was like, no, I'm not, because a lot of these memories make me smile and think of her in fond ways. Because, of course, I have hundreds of photos of my fucking cat. But then, there's also, like, even with that one guy, prefacing that there were good times, too. And I think that's important. Like, we've talked about, in years past, I think even in toxic dating culture, we talked about this, where you can convince yourself that it was all bad. Mm-hmm. And I think it's actually really important to remember it wasn't all bad. If for any other reason, I mean, even if you want to take, like, maybe you shouldn't demonize this other human for being a human because life happens.
Right.
But if not for that reason, for just the reason that maybe you don't need to convince yourself that you stayed with somebody where it was all bad. Because mentally speaking, that's not necessarily the best way to, like, treat yourself. Yeah. Right? Like, you wouldn't like it if a friend's like, you stayed with somebody and they were terrible the whole time. You know what I mean? Like, there's a judgment that kind of sits on that one, and I don't really care for with that mentality. So it's like, yeah, I like that with the dumb motherfucker that just wouldn't leave me alone, so I had to file the restraining order against. I've got the one who's like, I made me cry on the way to that, but I've also got, hey, that's that time we went to Vegas, and I got to see Against Me live for the first time, and it was my first real big, like, concert, festival thingy that I went to, and man, that was sure awesome that I went and played craps and won back what I spent on the package for the hotel and the tickets. Like,
nice.
That's actually why I've got, like, the dice tattoo, by the way, because I wanted to always remember that, like, that I played craps for, like, maybe 30 minutes, I won just a little over what I had spent, and I went, I'm done playing craps. And then I didn't play craps the rest of the week that we were there.
Oh, man, not like my only experience. No, I've been at a casino a couple of times, but my first time was when I went with my grandma on a senior bus trip to an Indian casino in Michigan, and didn't realize that they pumped oxygen into the casino. And I mean, granted, I came in with $250 and I left with nothing. I didn't sell a house or anything like that. And it was a fun experience, but I am not a gambler.
I had my set of, I saved, and I was like, I am okay with losing this amount of money. Mm-hmm. And then I took some of that money and went, oh, well, I've got the same amount I was okay with losing plus what I spent on this, so I'm going to keep that. And then I was done playing the high stakes games, just like, I played like a Willy Wonka penny machine for every now and then, like just for shits and gigs. But and I get it, like not every, like, cause the oxygen, it's meant to keep you awake. Like there's actually a lot of stuff they do to try to essentially coax you subconsciously into doing more.
Just one more time.
Because if they do all the things that makes you feel really good about being there. So really it's about that, not so much the gambling. And then of course, whenever you do have a small win, that mashes pleasure buttons in the brain. So if you've got that with the oxygen and the free drinks and all of the positive experience that makes you want to stay in this space, that's where you can lose all of your money if you're not disciplined and don't have a plan going in. So
yeah, which means I'll never go to Vegas. Let's put it that way, folks.
But that being said, that wasn't all bad, and I think that's important to remember as well, and especially since our topic today is kind of about that situation where a relationship ends. How to do it, and then we figured we could also talk a little bit of how we've unpacked some of our breakups, our bad breakups, our good breakups, etc.
Yeah, a couple more points for my past couple weeks here. As we record this, it is March 2nd. On March 1st was the 12th anniversary of the passing of my mother, so I will put it out there. Lovely couple of weeks, folks. And most importantly, too, speaking of the show, I did attempt to reach out to somebody to record an episode while you were gone, and that didn't go well.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah, the person I reached out to was someone that I have dated in the past. I mean, you know who it is, but I'm not going to say here.
Well, I mean, now I do. Because,
yeah. But, polyamory is kind of like two people or more, putting up dominoes for, one big domino thing. And, if one person breaks trust in that domino thing, you may be able to catch it before it ruins the whole map that you're making, but sometimes you don't. And I didn't realize just how much the map she and I had made was just messed up, because when I asked her and she responded, it brought back some anger on my part, and I responded to her in a way that I regret. It's not that I shouldn't have, expressed my feelings towards her. I just, should have expressed them in a different way, in a much more calmer way. Let's put it that way. But basically, the old Tim came out, and I don't like the old Tim, because the old Tim would take a person's worst fears and then just throw it back at them and do what he could to hurt them as much as he could. And that's not a good Tim. That's not me.
It's not a good human.
That's not a good human.
In general, right? Like, even friendships and those levels of relationships. Because friendships are relationships, too. Mm-hmm. That is something I always like to throw out there, is they also deserve time, attention, and, some focus. But yeah, if your friend also did that, not good. That's just maybe something, if you recognize in yourself, it is the kind of the respectful and responsible thing to do, to try to work on that, to not do that.
Yeah, and it does kind of tie in, as you said, to what we are going to talk about today. Breaking up is hard to do, folks. It really is. It doesn't get easy, but, kind of like identifying NRE. Yeah. If you become familiar with the proper ways to do a breakup, and there's no one specific way, but there are some general guidelines I think a person can follow, that if you go through those, depending on what we're talking about here, if we're talking, just two people that, whose paths are diverging. We're not talking, like violence or anything like that.
Violence or abuse situations. Yeah, those are totally different.
Yeah. So for a situation like that, we wanted to go through some key points about breaking up.
Yeah, and then this is a little bit more led by Tim. I know it's based on one of my favorite websites, a Psychology Today article. And then I'm sure we'll also go into some stuff too. Like, because for me, I think of having a... breaking up with somebody, actually being in a relationship in general, requires, in my humble opinion, one of my most favorite things, which is inward reflection, shadow work, shadow integration theory, if you're a big Jungian psychology fan, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's actually important to do before breaking up, because I think a lot of people really ride that high emotional brain. And then, unfortunately, when you're riding the high emotional brain, everything is that person's fault. And it's like, well, really, like, even your more toxic relationships tend to have, like, a little two-sided contribution.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where it can turn into, like, the yelling matches with couples, for example. I don't think it always started that way. Now, there are abusive people who are genuinely abusive out there that will immediately start cutting you down and stuff. And I think that's why it's kind of important to recognize, like, some of those good times too. And that's even going into, I'm in a lot of support groups, right? And someone will talk about a situation. I'm like, man, that sounds like that got really toxic. And a lot of people will jump on their abusive train. And that's where I'm like, this is like being written by one person. So we don't honestly know, like, that second half of it. But that seems more common, is that it gets toxic. It turns into this back and forth, and then it has a big explosive breakup.
Look at us. We've been open about, the fact that, we had a blow up in 2017 after the brief time that we dated. And I think, the core of the problem was miscommunication, or, a big tall guy not wanting to talk.
Well, and I even think, like, more my friends in longer term relationships, for example, like, I've had friends before where it starts with, and this is an attitude that's fully encouraged, especially if you are the female-bodied human in a straight couple situation, of, well, he did that, so you should do this back. And the problem with that mentality over having a conversation and fixing it is then you're putting venom into the relationship. That person feels like you are doing something just to be mean to them. So that can exacerbate other stuff where you're just basically getting into a pissing contest of being assholes to each other. And that feels way more common than they were just this person from the get-go and always and forever. And I'm like, and this is like me knowing both people, right? Yeah. Before, after, having very close relationships with them. But yeah, and I go back to, I'm not saying that every person who gets verbally abusive and verbally cruel is, like, innocent, quote unquote. I'm just saying the horses, not zebras, is that sometimes these relationships kind of get to this toxic level. And when you get to that and you haven't addressed it, and if your attitude, instead of addressing to have the difficult conversation, is to kind of double down on it by being a dick back, that kind of breeds kind of a situation where you're going to have a very tumultuous breakup.
Yeah, I mean, because I get it. Like, if you're in that emotional state where your emotions are heightened, you're going to want to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And you're only going to be focused on what this person did wrong to you without thinking about, what did I do that could have potentially led to these actions?
Exactly. And there's, like, a lot of people, it's like, oh, you're victim blaming. I'm like, no, I'm asking to do a mental exercise here to assess, is this person abusive, or has this relationship just taken a very toxic turn?
Indeed.
Because that's important to do. It goes back to even to yourself, right? Did I just, like, get into and stay in an abusive relationship, or are all of my relationships abusive? Or is there something that I possibly do that throws gasoline on the fire, and then it turns into this chain reaction back and forth?
Indeed, which leads us to the article here from Psychology Today titled How to Break Up. Some of the key points in the article, and we'll be going through some of the bullet points here, are breakups are often difficult, even if they seem to be mutual. The key is owning your problem rather than blaming them. Focus on the overall landscape rather than getting lost in details, and be compassionate but clear about next steps, contacts, and the state of the relationship. Give the other person room to say what they want. Now, I loved how the article was set up, and it was perfect for our circumstances here. But they had a before, they had the kind of like a preparation section, they had a dropping the axe section, and then after. So we'll dive into the before here. I'll start off with the first bullet point, and we'll alternate from there, and then just comment on it.
Yeah.
Number one, they said before, map out what you want to say, own your problem, and very important. Very important, because if you're talking about something that dramatic about, diverging paths with someone that you care about, you don't just want to blurt it out at the drive-thru at McDonald's.
Right. Like, map out what you want to say and own your problem also goes into what I said. Shadow work is very important. It also goes into another topic I like to bring up with couples and dating is you need to know your prices of admission. And it's kind of funny as it makes me think of, like I said, I'm in a support group and a lot of things get talked about in relationships. And this one person had expressed that, they had told the person they were dating they don't like smoking. I think that it was like a grandparent or somebody had passed from emphysema, etc. Found out this person was smoking behind their back. Okay? And it turned into this huge fight or whatever. And something I had expressed on there is that unfortunately your control, what's within your control is not what that other person does. Because tale as old as time. My person doesn't like me smoking, so I'm going to go do it and sneak off and do it and just chew gum, mouthwash, brush my teeth, change my clothes, have a smoking jacket. Like, that to me is almost one of those things that almost gets viewed as passable dishonesty in relationships in a weird way, because it is common. Now, granted, we're moving away from smoking. It seems like less and less people are smoking cigarettes. But here it is yet again. And so what I had expressed, which was you cannot control this person. What you can do is reflect inward and say, is this a true price of admission? Is this really something I need them to not do? Or is this something that I need to address within myself that I can't control them if they want to do it?
Yeah.
And that is owning your piece of it. Because if your piece of it is that you can't, that that's that important for you. That you would rather be single than insert blank, even if you don't want to use smoking as the example, that's still yours to own. That doesn't mean that you're part of the problem necessarily. You're just saying that I'm owning that I can't be in a relationship where blank exists. Right? Like, I think for me it would be like excessive drinking or drug use. Like, those are no-brainers. Like, sorry, meth, no thank you.
What? No,
yeah,
no.
like, like, that's one of those things where if I found it out, granted, if it was something that person slipped into, I would be willing to maybe entertain, like, counseling and talking about it. But if that person was unwilling to do anything, that is that much of a price of admission for me.
Nope, I love me some meth.
Yep, I love me some meth, and I hate me some counseling. Therapists don't work for me.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah, and for me, that's like a big price of admission. But that would be mine to admit to and mine to own. That's not, you could easily say, yes, it is wrong of them to do meth, all right? But where it's a little bit more unclear is it wrong of them to smoke cigarettes? It could be wrong to lie about it, because then it's an honesty issue, and that could actually be your price of admission, right? Because if you think about it, and it's the lying that you're having a problem with, that's still owning what it actually is that is the problem. From your perspective, that's not you're doing this. Well, I need a relationship where I'm not lied to. And that's still putting it back on you instead of the blame game where it's like it's really easy to demonize that person.
And I think, too, the thing to keep in mind is that, once you do find out what these prices of admission are for you, don't be scared to stand up for them. I've made that mistake plenty of times. That's why I'm single, folks.
Well, it breeds resentment. And that's, again, where it can go into that kind of toxic back and forth trap, right?
Yeah.
Because instead of communicating it's a problem, you bottle it up, it breeds resentment. And that resentment is probably going to come out in other ways, to where you basically just start being combative with each other and don't even realize it.
Or passive aggressive, you know, and it's definitely not healthy. But number 2, what do we got?
So number 2 is be honest about life after and the next steps. Obviously, I feel like this is a little bit more talking about like somebody that you're living with, right? Because if you've just been dating, like for example, you and I did not need to have that conversation. We did not have intertangled bank accounts. We didn't live together. But like the Mr. Reverend and I...
Different story,
Different story. And very honestly, and I know I re-listened to our toxic dating culture too, because our friend John, which by the way, shout out to him, real quick aside, he re-listened to it and decided to get rid of Tinder, for example.
Nice.
Because he was realizing, and John, I hope it's okay I'm mentioning this, because, he just kind of decided it wasn't working for him. right? Like, I had the why not both mentality, but yeah, if it doesn't work for you, if there's any app on your phone that you feel like every time you open it, it is triggering, fucking get rid of it. No app is worth getting triggered for it existing on your phone when your control is getting rid of it, right?
Yeah.
So, anywho, something that I had actually mentioned on toxic dating culture is that the Mr. Reverend, and we still do this, have these conversations about, and it's not because we actually think anything is wrong. It's, we've got a baby that's coming into our life, and we wanted to have that talk again. And I told him my stance is still very clear, and it's something I'm very open with my friends about because I want to be held accountable to it. That if anything ever happened, I want to work where we have equal time with our kid. We've even discussed sure, people will probably think we're weird, but why not get an extra room and try to see if we can try the roommate thing for a bit and do counseling for the sake of the kid until they're 18, right? Like, there's different ways to do it.
And the importance of doing that, especially for, someone in your situation, is the fact that the more you talk about this, the more concrete plans are put in place,
right.
And the more concrete plans are put in place. And I hope this never happens because the
right.
Mr. Reverend was made in a lab for you. He really was. But
we both got put through like a pressure cooker of life to turn into the humans that we are.
Yeah.
And that's led to a lot of mutual understanding of each other. But yeah.
But the point is, though, that it would allow, if the point ever came in the future where your paths did diverge, you would have that concrete plan in place to make life easier, and you wouldn't have a situation to where, what I've experienced and what other men in my position have experienced as well, of an ex-wife getting revenge thanks to lawyers.
Yep, and the family court system that literally makes money off of it, because half the time the lawyer is going to tell you what you can get to convince you into fighting, quote unquote, for that. And I don't think fighting is the best thing for your kids. That's where I'm a big proponent of like mediation stuff we've talked about. Like, we probably have a counselor to help us through that. So that being said, like, yeah, this is talking about talking it out like while you're going through the breakup. Something that the Reverend would put out there for the world is when you do start intermingling your life, be okay with having those conversations. Like, oh, we want to get on a bank account together. Well, let's talk about this. Like, what can that look like if we decided to split? Like, what's our agreement? What's our feelings here? If you do move in together, that was one of the first things that Mr. Reverend and I talked about, because we had a 2-bedroom. And we did move in, like, kind of not super early, but relatively early into our relationship, where we had already decided if something didn't work out, I'd move into the second room and we'd make do until either the lease was up or we can work something out, right? So it's like you can have those conversations while in the healthy stage of your relationship. And not only is it going to make it a little bit easier to have the conversation in this situation where you're breaking up, it might even have such a good bonding effect that it makes your relationship more honest, more healthy. Like, I don't know, some people think it's really crazy that the Mr. Reverend and I have these conversations. Like, oh my God, are you guys okay? And I'm like, yes, we're actually better than ever. We've had a lot of fights, and every time we've had a big blow up, like, we've come together and been feeling better about our relationship after it than before, because we've proven that we can actually have a disagreement, calm down, have a conversation, and keep going. And that actually gives you a very secure feeling in a relationship, better than walking on eggshells and feeling like you have to avoid every single little tiff. I would rather have a fight, be able to talk it out, and have a good, healthy relationship continue after, than to pretend that we never make each other upset.
And also think of some of the other things that, like in a relationship, like it would be comparable to someone that, never gets like life insurance or something like that, and then they die. What are we going to do about X, Y, and Z in terms of burial? I mean, you have to be able, if you are going to cohabitate with somebody, whether it be in a marriage situation or just, cohabitating, or anything, you have to have these conversations about what it would be like, so you don't get decisions being made in a highly emotional state by people that, aren't thinking clearly.
Right.
All right. Number 3, simple one, anticipate their reaction. Yeah, you want to think about how you're going to tell them the news and where you're going to tell them that news as well. Again, Burger King drive-thru, probably not the best place. If you're at their family's house during a holiday gathering, maybe not the right place.
Mid-flight, sorry. So this actually literally came up on a reel like last night when I was having problems sleeping. I guess I don't know the situation, but it was flight attendants trying to get this woman to like sit down, calm down, because her partner broke up with her halfway through a flight and she was flipping the fuck out. And of course, like some of my response is like, first off, and I've prefaced on the show before, I will never say seek therapy and mean it as an insult. But if that's your honest response to being broken up with, you might want to seek some therapy and work on whatever it is to maintain some healthier bonds with humans. Because, yeah, what I saw on that video was like, ouch. Like, I would hate to feel that way. And so if that's like your genuine response to getting broken up with, you might want to get a little bit of that self-work done before you get into another relationship. Like, maybe that maybe had something to do with some of the problems led up. I mean, I'm not going to pretend another couple. Nobody did. Mm-hmm. This was just, a stranger taking a video, which, again, it goes into I wish people would quit doing that. But it was interesting to see it. But, yeah, it's just maybe plan. And that's, I think it even says something about planning it better and having the time and place in another bullet point. But try to anticipate their reaction. If some of the reason you're breaking up with somebody is because of those very heightened emotional states, that makes sense to take that into consideration as you plan to do this. Like, totally.
Yeah. And I think with the plane thing, have an escape route, stuck in the middle of a plane, when you can't
in the middle of a flight, rough, man. Like, maybe don't do that. Like,
wait till after, you're getting your luggage, then you can run away.
I mean, granted, we don't know. Maybe they were coming back from a trip and something happened on that trip and the conversation just happened. Like, it may have been not planned, I guess, is one point to be made there. But, like, that was not a good thing. What was funny was the person that panned over to the baby, showing that the baby was actually being the quiet one on the flight. Somebody else's baby, not like theirs.
Got it.
It was it seemed like a younger person. So there's also maybe...
Like, God, shut up. All right, what is number 4?
So number 4 is give them a heads up. Which, I mean, that being said, like, yeah, if you're having problems in the relationship... And this takes a lot of emotional maturity and ability to do some inward reflections, some shadow work on both sides, is maybe, like, the breakup shouldn't be the first time somebody hears there's a problem, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, sure, maybe if it's only been like a week or two or you're casually dating, that's different. But again, this article seems to be a little bit more lean towards longer term couples. Yeah. Like, you shouldn't just suddenly there's problems one day.
But even then, though, even like, for someone that dated for as little as we did, it's still not something you just want to throw out there. Right. You want to be respectful of the other person's feelings. And who would want to be told on the middle of a flight, for example, I want to break up with you. That would not be a good feeling.
Right. And it was like, I go to my first marriage, which, I really doubt he listens to this, so I think I can talk about it. It's fine. No. And again, I'm not trying to demonize him. This is something that is very much in our culture. That's why I do love talking about it, because I want to point out that this is a flaw in our dating culture that I wish we would get out of. But, I was the one that kind of put together that there was problems. And I was the one saying, like, hey, like, do we do counseling? Do you just want to see a counselor on your own? Like, I was very open to trying to work with this human. But for whatever reason, he just didn't want to. And just, I still don't know what was wrong. Like, still to this day. So every now and then that gets into my little anxiety brain and like, what did you do wrong? And then I just, like, one day he literally just rolled over and was like, I don't think I want to be married anymore. Okay. And that was the first time he kind of really told me, like, that, I don't think I want to be married anymore. And then it was very dramatic, it felt. Even though I knew something was up. Mm-hmm. And I tried to kind of see if there was anything I could do to suggest to, like, work on it. This is why I'm a big proponent of, if you have problems and you're in a long-term relationship and you're very intermeshed, especially if there's kids involved, I fully support trying to involve a therapist, at least at first. Like, that therapist might help you unpack that it's not something you can work through. That's okay too. But making the attempt to me is better than just, well, I'm done with this morning. You have a good one. Enjoy that coffee date you're planning on going out with your friends. But yeah, like, just springing it on somebody's not cool, right? Like, there should be indicators. And if you can't find a place to do that, that goes back to even some of that number one of own your problem. Because if it's on you to communicate what's wrong and you're not doing it, that is kind of your problem and your contribution to the breakup.
Yeah, I mean, in my last relationship, I had approached her at a time in the past with some of my concerns and, told her that I think you don't want us to be in a relationship anymore because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, she said no until near the end of the relationship. She pretty much confirmed all of my points,
Right.
It's you got to be honest. You got to also have enough courage to be able to say to somebody, because we're talking about not demonizing. I don't believe the person that I dated was looking to intentionally hurt me at all. I don't. I just think that she was scared for whatever reason to be able to bring up issues that she had with me.
Well,
and that led to the problems becoming more elaborate as time went on.
And something just to throw out there, because this is also a tale as old as time. This happens. Mm-hmm. Now, also to further not demonize this specific human or any human, like if you're out there and it's like, oh my God, I feel like this happened to me. That being able to say that, to have answered you honestly, retrospectively, may have required a level of self-honesty that is also not highly encouraged in our culture.
Yeah.
Because there are people, that don't even recognize that they don't want to be in the relationship anymore, right? They want to mash the I believe button. They want it. Like, we have this whole, emphasis on, but it's been together for so long, so we must just force it and fake it till we make it fit. And that's not really going to build a good, healthy relationship. So if they haven't even addressed the fact that they don't want to be in it anymore, they can't tell you that they don't want to be in it anymore because they didn't know.
Yeah.
So it could have been even a hindsight thing. Again, I can't speak to this. I'm not in their head. I'm not in anybody's head. Just kind of throwing it out there that is a reality. That is a possible thing that can happen, is that they didn't mean to lie to you. They maybe just didn't think of it that way, or maybe they didn't have that self-honesty at the time to realize this wasn't something they wanted long-term.
Which is important to keep in mind because, again, unless we're talking about a case of abuse or something like that, you got to keep in mind that the other person is not a mustache-twirling enemy. This person did not date you for a couple of years just to, bring you down. There was no grand plan to, James Bond-level plan to destroy your life.
Yes, right now the popular misappropriated, misused psychological term is calling everybody a narcissist. And narcissistic personality disorder is incredibly rare, and there's actually a lot of very well-respected psychologists that don't think it's a standalone disorder and think it's actually a symptom. Like, high narcissism might be a symptom of other disorders. Mm-hmm. So, again, being in some of these support groups, you're with a narcissist. I'm like, well, but narcissism is actually something that we all kind of have. It's a little bit of that survival instinct. It's also where self-preservation comes from. Mm. That same concept that makes you want to, demonize that other human is because you want to, self-preserve to a level, and a certain point of that is incredibly healthy. But if you're not checking in on that, that's where it can become a problem.
And that kind of ties in with our next point here. The next big bullet point in the article was medium, timing, and place, and it had a great paragraph here that I will read. No text, no voicemail, and no ghosting. All these will be seen as being a coward, avoiding your awkwardness while inflicting maximum pain. The phone, Zoom might be okay if you're long distance. Otherwise, step up and meet in person. Consider place and timing. Again, no dropping the bomb after a great night. That's too confusing. No sitting in a car. There's nowhere to go, and it's a pressure cooker of emotions. sessions. Don't do it at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday when you've been drinking or worn out and everyone is stressed and tired. And don't do it over dinner at a fancy restaurant, which feels like a manipulative setup. And if you are in couples counseling and want to use a session to disclose this, give your counselor a heads up.
Yes.
Meaning, take that time to be considerate, to create the respect. I mean, think of the golden rule. I mean, how would you want to be broken up with? Think of that and then flip it in reverse and set up that scenario to where you do have a breakup in a way that will be respectful.
Yep, and you still also need to take that with a grain of everybody's a little different, right? This is kind of going into anticipating their reaction. Mm-hmm. If you know your partner at the time is in a highly emotional state and you know you're in more of a logical state, I'm going to call myself as being super fucking guilty on this one. You can't approach emotion brain with logic brain, and part of your logic brain needs to be taught that, especially if you're the one in the logical state, right? No offense to emotional-minded people. I really don't mean anything by this if you're in an emotional state. I'm just saying there are some drawbacks to being in the emotional state, which is kind of that inability of thinking on all angles, right? Mm-hmm. You think of when people panic, do anything. They're not necessarily doing the best things. Panic mode is very much that animal brain, that heightened emotional brain. However, if somebody can breathe and be logical, they tend to take steps differently. So I'm just saying that one of those steps might be to really consider the fact that if they are in a high emotional state, they might not absorb a breakup as well as you are in your logic state. So you actually may need to take that with a grain of, how would I want to be broken up with if I were in a highly emotional state? Now, if you're like a hyper logic person, and I think I have totally joked about this on the TNT review when we talked about human resources, that I think I've replaced my love bug and ambition gremlin with all logic rocks. Like, you need to understand that you might not be able to properly empathize with that level, right? And so that's where it's like, you can talk it out with friends who might be able to help you empathize and make a plan with that. And that's also the perk of if you are in therapy, which again, this is where it's a really great thing where if you're in a long-term relationship and you know there's problems, maybe that is a first step rather than just throwing out the whole relationship. Mm-hmm. Because you can use that counselor to help you navigate that. Right? Give them a heads up. Oh my God, please don't blindside your counselor with a breakup in a session. You can email them. Like, we have the technology to let them know before the appointment. Like, hey, I think that this relationship is ending, and I would like to use the therapy session to help navigate it because, and you can even say, I know that this person is in a very heightened emotional state when it comes to this topic, and I would like some help navigating it. They are a professional in this realm, right? Of dealing with emotion brain, of dealing with hyperlogic, and they might be able to help be a translator to those two very different languages of the mind.
Yeah, just, again, don't spring it on people.
Don't spring it on anybody involved in the conversation. If you're going out on a group date with friends, maybe don't do it there.
Yeah, whoops. Sorry, Shelley. Sorry to ruin your promotion
Shannon and
party.
Brandon. I know we were just gonna have desserts, but before dessert, break up.
Boy. All right, the next section they had here, dropping the axe, has some interesting bullet points. How about you dive into number 1?
Yeah, say what you want to say. I mean, granted, I kind of feel like that should have an asterisk next to it because there also are these things of, considering where they're at. Also, it teeters into be careful. If you're going to say what you say, try to own it more than blame it, right? Because that goes into saying what you're going to say can be interpreted as well, let me tell you what a piece of shit you've been for the last year. And that's not necessarily, if you go by the earlier bullet points, the best way to start that breakup, right? Because that's just going to get it immediately aggressive. Again, we self-preserve. That natural, healthy level of narcissism is there for everybody, whether we like it or not.
And that happened with us because, a lot of our issues, I talked a lot with my friends about it, but didn't really talk to you.
I had no idea, folks. Let me throw that out there.
until like the last day that we talked, and then I sent a novel of a text, and you were like, "Fuck it, I'm not reading this whole thing. Bye."
I think that is actually what I said because that sounds like me. Like it's like I'm not going to sit here and read a novel about how you think I'm a piece of shit or something.
Yeah,
I was like, nope, I'm done.
Which wasn't even my intention. It was to be able to talk it out. But this is stuff that if I had talked it out at an appropriate time, I mean, we would still be on the very same path that we are today, but we would not have lost 2 years of our friendship in the meantime.
Right.
You know?
Like, and it's fine because that even goes into, and I don't know if it's covered here or not. That's where both sides of the relationship needs kind of a level of emotional maturity to be successful.
It does.
Because you need to like be able to hear criticism. Like, right? Like, one thing that the Mr. Reverend and I laugh about is even though it's a pet peeve for both of us, we're both guilty about it, which is the sink will get full and we can't fill our fucking water bottles. And it's not really the other person's fault, but we both catch each other wanting to blame the other person for it.
Fuck you.
But we both do the goddamn dishes. Like, just as a silly example, right? But being able to hear, like, yes, this is something that I really like to have done, and being able to tell him back, like, well, me too. That works out great because then it's more of an emphasis on, okay, so we both could be better at this thing, but you have to be willing to be, I can be better at something for this relationship.
That does tie into number 2, which is stop and listen, which is very important for both people that are talking about, especially too in like polyamorous relationships when there could be even more. You want to have enough humility to be able to listen to what the other person has to say, because you could tell, person A, I want to break up, but maybe they want to say some things your way in terms of what if we try this? You want to be able to listen and respond appropriately to anything. And also, if you were the person being told that, I want to break up with you, listen, don't, it's emotions will come easy, they will come fast, and they will come hard, and it will be your first instinct to be like, fuck you.
Yep.
But take that time to take a breath, hear that person out.
Yep, because them wanting to break up with you actually might not have anything to do with you. It goes back to if they're owning their part of it, if they're owning their prices of admission, etc.
Mm-hmm. All right, what do we got for number 3?
So number 3, talk about practical matters in a separate conversation. And that even goes to, because if they are a logical person, that doesn't mean you can't be triggered into being emotional minded, right? Mm-hmm. I am, just, like I said, I joke that I have mostly been taken over by logic rocks, but I still do have, like, emotional times. Like, where that emotion brain takes over. Like, for example, I wasn't going to be making good decisions when we were in the clinic with Beans, and I was basically being told, you're saying goodbye today. Mm-hmm. The Mr. Reverend has never seen me break down like that. And I couldn't even speak, and they were trying to ask if they could do certain things, and he had to answer for me. So as much as I'm like, I'm super logical, nobody is impervious to having their emotion mind triggered.
Yeah.
Right? And especially because I do still deal with anxiety and depression and the symptoms that kind of get clustered with my CPTSD, is that of course I could be triggered into an emotional mind. And I think if you didn't think that, you probably have at least 1 or 2 examples that happened during this pandemic because it was an underlying stressor. And when you have an underlying stressor, you're more easily triggered into emotion mind.
Right.
Right? So that's where you don't want to talk about practical, logical things when you're in emotion mind. So especially when you are like living together, etc. and stuff like that, you might need to have that conversation separately unless you both actually happened to be on 100% the same page of wanting to split.
Yeah.
That's where I could see an exception. That is incredibly rare. And I think it would require a lot of the conversation and communication ability we talked about leading up to this, right? Because maybe you could be there, but odds are you're probably going to want to take a breather and take a day and then talk about, okay, so we've talked about splitting the bank accounts. How do we want to do this fairly? We've talked about, housing situation. How do we do this fairly? Like, that might need to wait.
Because, there are egregious things that a partner could do that would make another person say you need to leave today. But we're talking 2 people whose paths are just diverging. Yeah. You can let that person have their emotional moment and then come back at a later later time to talk about the nuts and bolts of how the breakup is going to, be good for everybody in terms of what you said for like bank accounts and all that.
Yeah, because those are like conversations that need to be had, but you need to be able to not be in an emotional state. And then I want to kind of slip into number 4 because I almost just said something. Is like, let them know they can set the pace in the next step. That being said, if you know you're the one instigating the breakup, if you know you're going to be the one in the logic mind when this happens, maybe have a plan to stay somewhere and give them some space so that they can be emotional. Hopefully, if you're an emotional mind, if you're the one in the emotion mind, don't spend it alone necessarily. Get a good friend. Preferably somebody who's not going to convince you that they always somehow knew they were an asshole, because that's not going to be good or helpful for the situation either.
Yeah.
But, find somebody who maybe is your more logical friend you can think of that can maybe come and try to speak your language a little bit and help nudge you over to that logical side you're going to need to be on to separate as amicably as possible.
Because it can happen. It can, and I think it should be encouraged more in terms, obviously. I mean, that goes without saying, because there was a point at one point to where two people thought that, they were the world to each other. Just because their paths diverge doesn't mean they still can't.
Right.
It's just going to manifest in much different ways.
It doesn't make anybody bad or evil. And this even goes into, helping to not do the ex-hate thing, which we've talked about on the show before, that I think it's one of probably the worst things in our culture, is that the best friend thinks it's their job to convince you that they were always an asshole. And I'm like, is it though? Like, is that really nice to convince somebody that they were with an asshole for X number of years? Like, no, I don't think so. But it's so common.
Or what I was annoyed by when I got my divorce was the amount of people that came to me and says, "I didn't like your ex-wife," and it's just like,
I never liked them, right?
Yeah, why didn't you say anything?
Well, and it's funny because I experienced that with my ex-husband, and I shut that shit down. I lost a friendship over it for a minute because of it. And I think that was because maybe they felt that my unwillingness to hate him somehow reflected on them. Like that I would somehow look at them poorly because they had an ex situation. They really didn't like them. And I'm not going to claim to know every angle of that relationship and why it ended. We were long distance at that point, like not in our everyday lives anymore. But I point blank told them, I don't think it's appropriate for you to convince me to hate him. And there was my logic brain popping up again and getting me in trouble like it does sometimes. But yeah, that was not received well. And it was taken as judgment. I didn't mean it that way. I just was trying to ask them to please stop because I didn't want that.
Yeah.
And what's funny is he has now since blocked me on Facebook and stuff. And it was weird because, I signed off so he could get a car, during the pandemic before we moved from Oregon. And last I checked, we were fine. And then one day, boom, just blocked. So it's part of me wonders if that's what happened. If somebody went she's a terrible person and blah, blah. Because I was like, you could have just deleted me from Facebook. You're acting like I was commenting and stalking your shit. You could have just deleted me. And that I probably wouldn't have cared. I probably would have been oh, okay, well, he just doesn't want to be friends anymore. But there was something that I took very poorly about being blocked. Because to me, that's you block people when they do something wrong. And so that's where it's I'll never know what's going on there or why that was. And it's okay. It's not my place to, right? It's not like we were going to coffee every week or something. And suddenly he just ditched me. But it was very jarring. And then I can't help but suspect that maybe is what happened. And because I assume that, if people were trying to talk me into hating him, which, if you're going to sit there and look at the argument, he's the one that didn't want to work on it. He's the one that didn't want to communicate. So I could see where my brain would want to give permission to do that. But see, you can recognize that and still go, but no. I don't know what was going on because, hey, part of the problem was he didn't talk to me about it. So I have no idea. He could have been totally convinced I was cheating on him. I wasn't, by the way. I didn't have time to. Just throwing out a common example of things that can kind of manifest and give people that kind of permission to not talk. And just kind of go into a high example. He very well could have been convinced I was doing something really, really wrong. I will have no idea, though. Right? So from my perspective, I felt like the quote-unquote wrong thing was not talking about it. I have no idea what his justification was, though. So I'm not going to demonize somebody over something that I don't know.
And that does kind of tie in with the last bullet point of the article here, the after, and it has a decent paragraph here that I will read. This is about mopping up. Your partner may want to talk more or not. Reach out, check in, offer to talk, propose next steps, but follow their lead. You want to be as open as possible, but you also need to take care of yourself. Decide how much contact you are willing to handle and what you're willing to do or not do. Don't become a victim of guilt. This is about change and grief and about being clear. It's more about emotions and less about facts. It's difficult, yes, but with planning and compassion, you both can move through it. And yeah, you don't want to be a victim of guilt, and you do if you have the ability to do so in terms of keeping that relationship just in a different way. Great, everybody wins. But
They're very healthy, by the way.
Yeah, it's just there could be times to where a person may want to try and talk you into coming back, which. Look into yourself, because if you're the one who instigated the breakup and they're trying to convince you to come back, and you're considering it, why? Yeah. It may be a good thing to consider why, and you may say, sure, I'll go back to you. But if you are insistent on the fact that the breakup needed to happen, don't be a victim of the other person giving you guilt, because it's not that they're intentionally, throwing guilt your way, but, it could be something as simple as, like sending a text. I missed you. I feel sad. I feel this. I feel that. Yeah. And you don't want a person you care for, even though you're not in a romantic relationship with them anymore, feeling bad. And I can see where some people not wanting to hurt somebody else would somehow get back. And I think that's where you have situations where couples break up and get back together multiple times.
Right. And then on the flip side of that, if you're the one that's on the receiving end of the breakup, don't be a victim of victim mentality, right? Because that's, again, where I think it's that slippery slope to demonizing that person. Mm-hmm. I'm a victim because I got dumped out of the blue. Like, I could focus on that with my ex-husband, or I could just focus on the fact, like, okay, it didn't work out for any reason. I don't really know what that reason is. I can pick up and move on. And then what was nice was it did make it easy to deal with stuff as it came up. For example, the car situation. Mm-hmm. If I had completely demonized him for he just didn't want to do anything, like, that would have been terribly awkward to have to go through that signing off on the car.
Yeah.
Because it was funny. He was supposed to, make sure everything was cleared. Like, that was his job he didn't want to do therapy. So I said, fine, you don't want to do therapy. I want you to handle all the paperwork, get our life separated. And he totally just didn't remember to make sure I wasn't on the car paperwork anymore. Whoops. So when he went to go get into another car, he needed me to sign it to get it. So I'm happy that I didn't fall into that kind of trap of me feeling like poor pitiful me doubling down on a decision to hate him, because that would have been horrible.
Deuces, try walking.
Yeah, it's like, have fun not getting that car you wanted, motherfucker. Like, I guess I could have been that way. But then you realize, well, you're also screwing yourself too, because then you're stuck on this car loan.
Yeah.
That somebody may or may not pay. It can affect your credit as well. So it was just kind of funny, like, that, that was able to at least play out in that way. And that's where I was thankful that I didn't indulge in those friends, because it wasn't just the one, by the way. Mm-hmm. That's where it's like, yeah, I think this is a problem, because I don't want to hate him, and I've got 3 or 4 people being like, you should hate that motherfucker. And I'm like, no, I don't want to. I don't see the worth in it, and you can't make me. Yeah. I'm sad. I was so sad about it for a while. But, I didn't really see the worth in getting angry, because what does that honestly serve?
Indeed. And like we, said from the top, does this discussion work with every single relationship out there? Of course not. If there's abuse going on or anything like that, that's a completely different ball of wax to deal with here. But, at the end of the day, we hope you if you've listened through all this, we hope something we said kind of helps you if you are going through that struggle with a breakup, because it's not fun. It doesn't get better the older you get, but I do think the importance of, acknowledging stuff like this can make it to where the logic part of your brain will step up a little bit more. Kind of like with NRE. Like I said, if you know what to expect, then your brain will find ways of taking over when you don't necessarily want it to.
Yeah, invest in emotional IQ development. Like, especially if you are single or if you're not single. Mm-hmm. That's something you can always work on training yourself towards, because it is just going to help you either have a healthy long-term relationship that continues, or it can help you unpack and deal with things like this where you do know that you want to be done with a relationship. Or it can help you unpack and deal with things like this when somebody decides they're done with being with you in a relationship. Yep. Like I fully credit the my own personal curiosity and emotional intelligence for being able to handle that divorce the way that I did. Mm-hmm. Because I don't know if I would have gotten that to any other way, but I had glammed onto emotional IQ development as a way of dealing with some of my symptoms of CPTSD. And so I fully credit that with helping with other parts of my life too.
And I think for me, we've spoken about this off air, but I think the introspection I went through after we had our split allowed me to understand just how emotional I've been in terms of past breakups and how easy it was to demonize the other person.
Yeah.
Even my ex-wife, who I have legitimate reasons to not like. If I'm honest, though, she has legitimate reasons not to like me.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to make another person a bad person, because I was doing that with you, and we barely dated a month.
Yeah, because I don't even know if we've ever said how long we dated. Yeah, it wasn't that long, guys.
Yeah, it quickly became clear that, for romantic stuff, it was never going to work, and that's respectful to say.
And that's okay, because that's about the time frame where you should be figuring that out, right? Like the first month or two, you should kind of know if it's going to work or not, and not taking it personally if somebody says this isn't going to work for me, should be better accepted by people.
Yeah, just
right?
Don't be a butthurt balding guy.
Oh, stop. I'll go back to I'm not going to
kidding.
pretend to understand everything I said or did during the time, but I can at least, with the emotional maturity that I've groomed in myself, with you, with my ex-husband, with any of my exes, can say, even though I'm not aware specifically where I fed into it, I can at least be open to the fact that maybe there were some things I could have done better. And I think that's that emotional maturity that people could really use to groom. And then going back to what I said at the beginning of the show, breaking up is also hard to do with friends, that it doesn't work. You can take all of this information and pretty much apply it to the friend aspect too. That you're not going to be perfect. You're not always going to be in the right. You can also be feeding into a toxic friendship.
Yeah.
So, we wanted to focus more on Love Month, but agape or friend love is also important too. And emotional intelligence grooming is something you can really do for yourself to not only help you have healthier relationships, it can help you be the better person, not better compared to the other person, just being a better human, a better version of yourself when breaking up. And it can also help you deal with being broken up with in a better way.
Indeed.
So across the board, I think my end thing here is emotional IQ shit is cool, guys.
Indeed. And I think that will wrap it up for us here this week. Next week, Love Month will continue as we talk about NRE.
Yes, because we're just going to go ahead and extend it since we wound up having to take those 2 weeks off from me being in New Hampshire.
Indeed, but also too, the ones from the archives definitely fit in with Love Month as well. So, it definitely was the right stuff to talk about. But
it was a good episode. Like I said, I enjoyed listening to it again. So
Indeed. And so we thank you all for listening. Remember to check out Tim's Tremendous Tapes on Thursday as we speak. The episode that is currently released is Tim Goes Country. I listened to 5 country albums. Next week I'm listening to albums that were released in 1988. And as far as Friends Talking Nerdy goes, each Saturday we'll have something in this podcast space to entertain your ear holes. Until we meet again, we bid you adieu.
spread love, not hate.
Fuck yeah.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy on iTunes, the Google Play Music Store, as well as Spotify. Remember to support Friends Talking Nerdy on Patreon. Goodbye, darling.